Very well, so this program works as expected. And now let's add another stage to explore the functionality of our validator and handling input. It may be possible that this string that we get from the user right here contains an integer value. So maybe we could add a code like this, call it value equals validator, and have another method that I'd like to add here. We'll call it string to int or integer. I think it's more readable like this. So I will pass this string that I got from the user. I already displayed the content of the string. And now if I'm expecting that this string contains some kind of numeric input, what I would like to do is to add new method to our validator class that is called string to integer. Right, so this is basic idea like that. And then to be able to just to test everything, we're going to print this value after the conversion. So string to integer is another method that we'd like to add to our validator class. Of course, because we call it from the static main method, we're going to make it public static. We're expecting it to return an integer back, right? Because we're expecting this method to return back an integer value. So int is the return type, and this is the name of our method. And the input is string str. Okay, it doesn't matter what is the name of this string. So let's mark the ending of this method so we can quickly recognize where is the ending of this. And normally in Java, when you have to convert from string to an integer, we can use the help of the integer helper class that has a method such as parse int. Of course, parse has to do something with an input, and parse int will take a string from us and return back an integer. And all we have to do then is just simply say return. Okay, so just return parse int. Let's see how this works. Okay, so far it's methods that can be implemented by a single line of code are my favorite types of methods. I never mind having such a simple method like this to deal with what I need to accomplish. So I'm pretty happy about this. I'm going to save everything. I'm going to run it and just see how everything works. So we'll say enter non-empty string. Okay, so this time I enter something that looks like an integer, and you can see that the second time the value printed right here is an integer converted from string to an int. Okay, so we can clarify it by saying string, and this would clarify like this an int. Okay, so if we rerun this code one more time, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we see that this is a string and this is an int. So this let's find out how it works if we run it again and enter a non-numeric string such as ABC. Okay, so let's begin to understand what just happened. Well, first of all, there is a mentioning of an exception object. Remember, we told that exception is an object in Java which encapsulates information about an error. So I recognize that in our function, in class named main app, we have our main method, and it shows me that on line 11 output view that the console environment has generated for me, we can click right here, and it indicates that right on this line something didn't work as expected. So I will define this invalid int as follows. I can say public static final int invalid int equals integer max int or max value. Okay, so this integer helper class that exists in Java library, in Java language, gives us access to the maximum value and the minimum value that can be stored in the integer variable. So this is where I say invalid int, and I decide that let's use this max value as an invalid int. So this is where I return it. Of course, I need the semicolon, so this time what I'm expecting is that parse int could fail. When it fails, what it does, it generates an exception object. This exception object has to be handled, and this is an example how we can handle it. We can say, let's capture this exception, let not propagate this exception outside of this method by enclosing this statement that involves the call into parse int into a try and catch block. So we'll formally explore the syntax of try and catch block when we return back to our error handling presentation. But this here that we're trying to write code and handle properly is an example of runtime error. It will not happen if the string contains correct format of an integer, but if it doesn't, if it's some kind of garbage value, then we will generate this runtime error, which will become visible as this number format exception object. So this is a way to handle exception directly inside our method. So let's try this now. And of course, to continue testing, we can always say that if our value equals validator invalid int, then we can basically rather we can probably just generate this output statement only if there is no problem with this input. So if the value does not equal validator invalid int, we're going to print int value. Otherwise, we should be able to see this message anyways. Let's save everything and do a quick test of what is happening now with an addition of this try and catch block that is supposed to eliminate propagation of this exception outside of method name string to integer. So when I run it and try 1, 2, 3, everything works as expected. I run this again, and this time I tried a non-numeric input, and you see that the first output prints the string. Then we say we cannot convert ABC string to an int, and then this is no longer printed because we've created this invalid int. I basically took away from the range of all integers the maximum value, which is like positive 2 billion value, right? 2 billion something. And so I'm using this to report an invalid input, rather invalid result of conversion of my string to an integer. So again, this is an example of how much effort sometimes it takes to handle pretty simple tasks, right? So our task is to get non-empty input string from the user, and the second task right here is to convert, or we can say attempt to convert to an int, right? So we're trying to convert to an int, and we'll try to make this code as generic as possible for the main program, which is sort of like a client of this validator class. And here we're trying to address all details about possible error conditions, exception types, and also it seems like we deciding on what kind of error messages to give to the user when we detect those conditions.